Welcome back to Arsenal Pass. It's Hayden here with another Blitz deck tech, this time Rhinar. Now, the other week, when I put a poll out on Twitter asking, which of my skirmish decks would people like to see a deck tech on, the Plasma Barrel Shot Dash deck was, by far and away actually ended up being the winner, or at least when I looked. But Rhinar was also quite popular. Sorry, Briar, just wasn't your time. But Rhinar was also quite popular, and it was the deck that I played for week 1, which I managed to win a skirmish with, and honestly was just like, it's me. It's Hayden. If you've watched any of the Arsenal Pass videos on our channel before, you know how much I enjoy playing Rhinar. And so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to record this after recording this dash deck and get it out there as well. So this one's a little bit shorter. This one's a bit more straightforward. I think this Rhinar is a lot more well known. I think there's other resources out there for people who have played similar decks, even in this skirmish format. I played Rhinar right back in Skirmish Season 1. I played a very similar deck. In actual fact, I think there's about 6 or 7 cards different. Just new cards that have come in with Everfest mostly, and a couple of equipment pieces that are different to the deck that I played all the way back in Skirmish Season 1 last year. So what is this deck? Well, it's a Mandible Claws Rhinar deck. That's what it is at its heart. And what it's trying to do is basically utilize a lot of what this format is 2 to 3 turns and trying to find a really big spike turn. And I've been super impressed with Hardened Crosstrap and Goliath Gauntlet this skirmish season in the Blitz format because of this fact, because it is a shorter format, and trying to use these cards as card enablers for big spike turns, and this deck can do it with the best of them. So because of the Intimidate nature, this Goliath Gauntlet is almost always just 2 damage to the face, because when we're cracking it, we're pushing through damage anyway. And then the Hardened Crosstrap is going to allow us to do some pretty silly things off very few resources, which we'll talk about as we get into the deck. But into the deck itself, pretty straightforward. Let's get straight into it and talk about some of the enablers, some of the things that we're trying to do with these big sort of spike turns that I talked about at the start of the video. Bloodrush Bellows, of course, the cornerstone of any Rhinar deck as we've seen so far in Flesh and Blood, whether it be class constructed, whether it be Blitz, whether it be, I guess, even UPF, right? Like, this is a very important card to what Rhinar's trying to do and pairs really well with Mandible Claws. So what we are often trying to do is find a Bloodrush Bellows turn, and how we get to that point is either we see it early and we probably just set it up, or sometimes we don't even need to set it up. We just play it straight out with a 6 attack, or a blue and a 6 attack in hand, plus maybe it's 2 6 attacks. We usually want to do this off a 5-card hand, though. It's pretty important, and usually with attacks in hand, so that it doesn't matter too much what we discard. Of course, we don't want to be playing this if we have a non-6 attack to discard. We want to avoid that at all costs. That's the way we lose the game. Other than that, Bloodrush Bellow, we also have some of the new cards in the form of Wild Ride, now which goes alongside Pulping. Now, Wild Ride, I much prefer to Pulping, just for the simple fact that people are still playing defense reactions in Blitz. If you run into Old Time in particular, even some of the Warriors playing defense reactions. So the non-conditional go again, as long as you discard the card on Wild Ride as opposed to Dominate, I think is a lot better. And this also enables Claws turns, and that's really important for those turns. The other card that's been really important coming out of this is Bare Fangs and Swing Big. Now, Bare Fangs is actually really similar to what Swing Big does in this deck, and that's be really, really efficient and help us push on a big turn. So 2 for 8 damage is a lot of damage, and that's both what Swing Big and Bare Fangs, albeit conditionally, does give you. So one of the best things that you can do on the end of a Bloodrush Bellows turn is pop a Swing Big or a Bare Fangs on there for 10 extra damage at the cost of 2 resources. Just absolutely huge. And there's a couple of lines which, when I get in some lines of play with this deck, which I will do before the end of this video, you'll be able to see what some of these sort of key lines are. But even just to be playing these by themselves, 2 for 8 damage is really important. And that's actually how we're going to get through some of the tougher turns. Maybe we're having to defend out with 2 cards and then come in with an 8 attack or a 6 attack, or even a barraging beatdown plus a weapon attack. Just take cards from the opponent or just trade damage, all while we try and find a really big setup with a Bloodrush Bellows turn. Or some of the other really big setup turns we can do can involve like an Alpha Rampage plus something like a Barraging Beatdown. Take 3 cards away from the opponent, and as long as we know they're not playing defense reactions, yeah, they can defend with 1 card, but we're coming in for 13, maybe even 15 damage with the Goliath Gauntlet. We're going to push 10 plus damage on those turns. We just need to find a couple of these turns, and we can win the game. This deck really utilizes the Intimidate mechanic and pushes that damage. So key cards in the deck, as I say, Bloodrush Bellow, the Swing Bigs, and the Bare Fang plus the Wild Rides, and to an extent the Pulping as well, just a 3rd Swing Big effectively, Wild Ride effectively, and then the Alpha Rampages. And then outside of that, the other important cards to us are the Barraging Beatdowns. That's kind of our alternate win condition. We want to try and push through damage with our attacks, but there's also something we can do in the end game where if the game goes on, it's quite grindy, maybe it's a Bravo or an Ultim or some other sort of grindy deck that's able to sort of defend out and tax us. Maybe it's a Lexi, for instance, Ice Lexi. Well, we can pitch a lot of these Barraging Beatdowns to the end of our deck, and we can actually just play like 3 or 4 Barraging Beatdowns at once. Take all or but 1 card from the opponent, so the Barraging Beatdown effect is turned on, and we just kill them that way with a Mandible Claw. So that's the other thing that this deck can do kind of in the end game. So a lot of different avenues to attack with the deck itself, and there's a lot of play to this. How I would describe this deck is it's like very similar to other decks in this current format. It wants to find a big spike turn, maybe even 2, but it's also happy to trade damage. All of your cards, except for these Wild Rides, Pulping, and Bare Fang, defend for 3. The deck does defend really, really well and can actually trade in that mid game. So decks that aren't, Viscerai or the dash deck I showed last week that are just going to explode with a big bunch of damage over 2 to 3 turns, you can actually trade with those decks. Kasai, we have a lot of non-attack actions that defend for 3. We can actually prevent them from getting copper and getting that big blood on our hands turn, all while we set up, pitch our cards, and find that Barrage and Beatdown turn or the Blood Rush Bellows turn and finish it off that way. What this deck is not, though, and I want to point this out, is this is not a Scabskin Leathers deck. We get into the equipment in a second, but you'll notice this is the core of the equipment here. Sideboard is over here, sideboard of the equipment. Gambler's Gloves are sitting over there for a reason. This is not a deck that is focused around Scabskin Leathers and trying to generate actions, because we don't really need to be honest. Blood Rush Bellows, Alpha Rampage, this Wild Rides, those are our key sort of linchpins of the deck, and those don't require anything to do with Scabskin Leathers, really. So we're just trying to find those turns, as I say, trade damage. Yes, the Scabskin Leathers can be relevant to something like a control deck, where we kind of get free rolls, but I still don't think you necessarily need the Gambler's Gloves, although I know a good friend of mine, Jason Long, he argues he'd probably play the Gambler's Gloves into Ultim. I don't disagree, I think that's probably fine. I might just cover matchups at the end of this video before I close it out. But I will say, in my opinion, it's not a Scabskin Leathers deck. It's a deck that defends well. It's a deck that uses these Hardened Cross Straps and Goliath Gauntlet. Probably my 2 favorite pieces of equipment in Blitz right now. I'm trying to find as many decks as I can that play these, which I think is also cool because they're budget items as well. Although not these cold foils in particular, but these 2 items are budget items, which I think is really good for this Blitz format. Limit these legendaries, and even to the extent that you don't even really need to be playing the Arcanite Skullcap. You could easily play another hood, maybe the Skullhorn. That's going to really enable you on a big turn, like one of these Barrage and Beatdown turns. Or you can play something maybe like Hope Merchant's Hood, or even an Iron Rot Helm. So perfectly fine. Do just want to talk about the equipment, of course. I've waxed lyrical about the Goliath Gauntlet and Hardened Cross Strap and how they're going to set up some big turns. A for one of these Swing Bigs or Wild Rides. Goliath Gauntlet to push that 2 damage. Arcanite Skullcap, just a good defensive item. Scabskins, likewise, but also, when our back's against the wall or we have a free roll, I'm not afraid to do it. I'd probably say I roll on average with this format once every 3 games, but that can really depend on matchup. Control decks that aren't threatening me, I'm more likely to take a punt on a Scabskin roll where it doesn't hurt me. Or if I'm like, I'm into Viscerai, I'm back against the wall, I need the 2 actions because I need to spike the damage, otherwise I just lose the game. Yeah, that's when I'm looking to roll Scabskins. And then Mandible Claws, of course. I wouldn't say it's a Mandible Claws deck, but they are pretty crucial when we're coming in with the Blood Rush Bellows turns or off of a Wild Ride. Really important as well. In the sideboard, we do have some options. Gambler's Gloves. I'm personally only playing them into KO, but I think there's an argument to play them into some of these more defensive decks where you do want to punt on the Scabskins a bit more, just to give you that security. I'm happy to kind of set up the bottom of my deck, pitch these Barrage and Beatdowns, and play for that in-game, and I'm okay with that. But if you feel that maybe the pitch stacking aspect is a little bit daunting, or you just want to be able to rely on those rolls, yeah, play Gambler's Gloves, but make sure that you're on the Goliath Gauntlets for most of the other matchups. Nulrune Gloves is going to give us that Arcane Barrier, and I actually prefer to play the Nulrune Hood in the moment into Viscerai. I think I just want these spike damage. I want to be able to try and end the game. If it goes more than 3 turns, Viscerai is going to be able to push through with all those rune chants they have. So I'll play the Nulrune Hood into Viscerai, but I'll play the Gloves and then the Skullhorn into Wizards, of course, to give us that Arcane Barrier 3. Arcbone, I'm basically only actually probably playing that into Benji. There's an argument maybe you want it into these new really aggressive Ira decks as well. I'm undecided. It's a slot that's kind of flexing for me. And the only other change I might think about for the equipment side of it is I might think about taking this, maybe the Nulrune Hood out, putting in Nulrune Boots. Gives us option for Arcane Barrier 4, although with the amount of blues we have, I don't actually think that's necessarily good. But into Wizard, I actually just don't think the Scabskin Leathers are that relevant. You have like Wild Rides and ways to generate actions and ways to intimidate and stuff. So I'm not actually that keen on the cards. So playing around with this equipment suite is something I think you could definitely look at. Just to close out before I move to talking about some of the lines in this deck and some of the matchups and what I'm playing into each of those matchups from an equipment standpoint, I do just want to talk about some of the other cards that are sitting here for us that I think is important to mention kind of what I like to do with these cards. So Savage Feast is a card that in classic constructed decks and in other decks, I often am trying to set up with like a Sand Sketch plan. It's no different in this deck. This card is great off Sand Sketch plan for that guaranteed double action. Sometimes, and I exercise restraint with this and would say the same for you, is Sometimes I'll scab skin into a Savage Feast, but I'm really only doing this if I feel like it's free or, it's going to give me massive, massive upside from where I am right now because I'm, most of the time not playing the Gambler's Gloves. But that's the best way for Savage Feast. The Command and Conquer, this is a flex slot. You could easily cut this for anything else. I would say, though, I want to keep my 6 attack count high, so I wouldn't cut it for something that doesn't have 6 attack, basically a 6+ attack. It could be another Riled Up, just give you extra yellow. I mean, I would imagine a world where it could be an extra 6 attack blue. One day we'll get it for Rhinar. It could also just be a pack hunt, to be honest. It just is a brute card that has Intimidate, which is great on the end of Bloodrush Bellows and sometimes necessary. I wouldn't add another card that doesn't defend in this current meta. I think there's a real liability with how this deck wants to trade damage in the mid game. Having 5 cards that don't actually defend can be a massive liability. So I wouldn't add an extra Pulping or Bare Fangs or anything. As good as I actually think Bare Fangs is, I think one is enough. Other cards here, probably the Reckless Swings. We played 2 Reckless Swings. These can be great win conditions at the end of the game. You get that big spike turn in, maybe you leak a little bit of damage here or there, and then you're really into a grind versus some decks like Kasai or something. Great win condition in the form of Reckless Swing there to get those last few points of damage and kill them that way. And then High Roller, which it's basically Barraging Beatdowns sort of 7 and 8 in a deck where you're looking to maybe set up that Barraging Beatdown sort of kill that I talked about, where you want maybe you end up with like 2 Barraging Beatdown, 1 red, 1 yellow, and then a High Roller. And that's how often you're looking to use that High Roller. So it's a blue that has some great utility. All right, last thing I wanted to go through is just some common lines of play and just talk a little bit how this deck tends to play out, especially around some of these bigger turns that I talked about. Now, in terms of like arsenal targets, really great targets are Bloodrush Bellows, the Bare Fangs, the Wild Rides, the Swing Bigs, of course, and even the Alpha Rampage, although in some matchups, just be careful because while that intimidates 2 and can do, push a lot of damage, it's not actually super resource efficient. It's 3 cards for 9 damage, so on rate damage is not great. So you really want to prioritize that card into matchups where the Intimidate is really important, like control matchups, as opposed to more aggressive matchups. I often defend with that card a lot more. But let's just say we have this kind of hand in the game. We've arsenaled the Bare Fangs. It's a priority card we had last turn. We know we want to set it up for something like a Bloodrush Bellow turn, and we just came in with like another Yellow Smash Instinct for 6 damage or something. We defended with our other 2 cards. Well, now we've drawn this up pretty easily. We can pitch this Reckless Swing, play the Bloodrush Bellows, lose one of these cards, and we're going to be left with, say, this in hand plus 2 unknowns. Now, let's just say that we draw a yellow and a red, or even 2 reds. 2 cards that just don't really do anything. 2 Savage Feasts in this case is going to be really difficult for us to utilize well. Well, that's okay. We can what we can do instead is we can just go pitch, come in with a Claw for 5, pitch the 2 reds, come in with a Claw for 5, and then we can break this Hardened Cross Trap. We can actually even do it before the chain, so we don't break the chain for equipment purposes. We can even use the Goliath Gauntlet here as well. You just want to use these on a turn where you know your opponent can't defend the damage. It's going to be just free damage through. And then you can play the Bare Fangs on the end of a chain, or even something like a Swing Big is great on the end of a chain. A few different things. Maybe you've got the extra resource, so Massacre on the end of a chain is really good as well. Maybe the Bloodrush Bellows is just from Arsenal. So this general, the plan is like Mandible Claw, big threat. And if you're lucky, sometimes it's like Mandible Claw, like Wild Ride, another threat. Like there is ways you can do that because of the Hardened Cross Trap. It gives you a lot of that extra utility. One of the awkward things with Rhinar often is that like I have this resource card in hand, but I might lose it to a random discard. But with Hardened Cross Trap, you have resources on the board, so there's always these sort of plays you can make. So keep an eye out for those kind of plays where you might lose a card that ideally you wouldn't want to lose in other circumstances, but it's not going to finish your turn off because you have these 2 resources sitting here. Pitching a blue, playing something like a Wild Ride. Oh, I've drawn into a Massacre, but I didn't discard it. That's okay. I still get to play it because I have this Hardened Cross Trap. It's going to give me the 2 extra resources I need with that extra 1 floating to push in with that attack. So that's why I really like these in this deck, and I think they're like, I want to play them in basically any matchup I can. I'm trying to justify it in this Rhinar deck. And yeah, the lines look pretty much like that. Outside of Bloodrush Bellows lines, where maybe you don't have the Bloodrush Bellows lines, well, I talked about it before, something important to try and push damage maybe looks something like a Barraging Beatdown and an Alpha Rampage, right? So still going to give us really good utility and value here to come in, play this Barraging Beatdown, play the Alpha Rampage, pitch this blue to do so, and discard, whatever 6 attack you have. The Bare Fangs is just the example I have. Maybe it's this Riled Up or whatever it is. It's going to come in with 12 damage, but we're intimidating 3. So as long as we, know they don't have a defense reaction in Arsenal, or it couldn't possibly be a defense reaction in Arsenal, we know we're going to push at minimum 9 damage plus any equipment they want to throw if they decide to block with that 1 card in hand. But we know we're going to get through damage. So like what a lot of the sort of plays are around is just how we can push damage and when we want to maybe take those turns to do so. But don't be afraid to defend. As I say, the deck defends well, has a lot of cards that defend for 3, so if I haven't got a big turn, or, I'm going to come back in with maybe the same amount of damage, but the Intimidate just isn't relevant because it's not going to put my opponent to a life total that's important, and then they get to come back in with another 5-card hand. Why don't I just defend? Maybe I just defend with 2 cards and then come in with an attack for 6, and just try and trade some cards and just get through to a better hand. It's something that you shouldn't be afraid to do, especially in matchups that aren't, 2 or 3 turn games, like into a Viscerai or something like that, maybe even a Dash. So that said, that's everything I wanted to add on this Rhinar deck. I think it's super fun to play. I think Rhinar is actually really good in this current format. I think it has game into basically the whole field. I think it has a lot of like really close matchups, and then some matchups, like honestly, I think the Kasai matchup is so good for Rhinar. I found it hard to even get close to losing that matchup, just because you have these cards that defend well in the form of your non-attack actions. You have these ways to basically deny them copper and deny their big blood on a hand's turn. And also, you have these ways to just say, okay, well, cool, I know you want to defend with 1 or 2 cards because your hand's a little bit weaker, your output's not that high. Well, towards the end of the game, I'm just not going to let you do that. I'm just going to push the damage through. And so unless you draw really well and have really explosive turns early, then you're going to be in a bad spot. And even then, I can still defend out. So that's why I think Rhinar has a really good matchup there. But yeah, pick it up, play it, see what you think. Tell me how much you're enjoying Hardened Crosstrap and Goliath Gauntlet. Is it as much as me? Because I'm loving these 2 cards in this current Blitz format and through the Skirmish season. Thank you to everyone for watching the deck tech. If you wouldn't mind going and dropping a like if you did like this deck tech and you want to see more Blitz deck techs or classic constructed deck techs from myself and Brendan, things like this, let us know you enjoyed the video. Drop a like, maybe even a comment and say what you liked about the video. Make sure you subscribe. We're pushing for that 4,000 subscriber mark. Hopefully we're almost there by the time this video drops. It is 1 year of Arsenal Pass. It's been 12 months of me and Brendan doing this, and we love doing it and want to continue doing it. So just want to say a big thank you to everyone out there who supported us through listening to the podcast, watching our videos, and everything else. Thank you very much.